There's a stretch of road in the mountains that most people will never notice. It doesn't appear on modern GPS systems. It isn't marked on travel maps. And if you ask people in nearby towns about it, most of them will just shake their heads and change the subject. But older truck drivers know about it. They call it Route 417. And the reason they remember it is because of something that happened there almost 30 years ago. Back then, Route 417 was a quiet highway connecting a few small mountain towns. Nothing special, just forests, cliffs, and long empty stretches of road where you could drive 4 miles without seeing another car. One of those towns was called Greyford. Greyford wasn't big. Maybe 2,000 people at most. A small school, a diner, a gas station, and rows of wooden houses built along the hillside. People who passed through described it as peaceful, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew each other. And for years, nothing unusual ever happened there. Until one night, it was late autumn. Cold winds coming down from the mountains. Most people in Greyford had already gone to sleep. But around 2 o'clock in the morning, something strange happened. Every light in the town suddenly went out. Not just in one building, not just one street. The entire town went dark at the exact same moment. No electricity, no phones, no radios, just silence. At first, people assumed it was a power outage. Those happen all the time in mountain areas. But the strange part was that the surrounding towns still had power. Only Greyford lost electricity. For about 20 minutes, the town sat in complete darkness, and then something even stranger happened. The lights came back on. Everything returned to normal, or at least that's what people thought. Because the next morning, when the first truck driver passed through Greyford on Route 417, the town was gone. Not abandoned, not destroyed, just gone. The buildings were missing. The houses were gone. The diner, the school, the gas station, all of it had vanished. Where the town had been, there was only an empty stretch of land covered in dirt and grass. At first, the driver thought he had taken the wrong road, but he hadn't. He stopped his truck and walked into the empty field. And that's when he noticed something chilling. There were still roads. The asphalt streets were still there. But they didn't lead to anything anymore. They just ended in empty space where houses should have been, as if someone had erased the town, but forgotten to erase the streets. When authorities arrived later that day, they expected to find some kind of natural disaster. But there were no signs of destruction, no fire. No earthquake damage, no debris. And most disturbing of all, there were no people. Every single resident of Greyford had disappeared. 2,000 people vanished overnight. For weeks, investigators searched the area around Greyford. They looked through forests. They searched nearby towns. They even sent helicopters across the mountains. But they never found a single resident. No bodies, no vehicles. No clues explaining where the people had gone. Eventually, the government quietly closed the investigation. The official explanation was simple. They said the town had been abandoned years earlier, and the story was just a misunderstanding. But that explanation didn't make sense, because hundreds of drivers had passed through Greyford in the weeks before it disappeared. They had eaten at the diner, filled gas at the station, talked with the people who lived there. Those people were real. And then they were gone. For years, the mystery remained unsolved, until a man named Daniel came forward. Daniel had been 17 years old the night Greyford disappeared. He didn't live in the town itself. His family lived on a farm about 5 miles outside the town limits, which meant when the blackout happened, Daniel was the only person outside Greyford who saw what came next. According to Daniel, the power didn't just go out. Something else appeared in the sky. At first he thought it was lightning, a strange blue glow above the mountains. But the light didn't flash like lightning. It stayed there, hovering above the town. Daniel said the light slowly spread across the sky like a curtain, and everything underneath it started to glow. The houses, the streets, even the trees. The entire town was covered in that blue light. Daniel watched from his bedroom window for almost 10 minutes. Then something impossible happened. The town began to fade, not explode, not collapse. Fade like an image, slowly disappearing from a screen. The buildings became transparent. The streets blurred, and within seconds, Greyford simply vanished. The light disappeared immediately after it, leaving the mountains completely dark again. Daniel told his parents what he saw the next morning, but by the time authorities arrived, the town was already gone. For years, people ignored Daniel's story. They assumed he imagined it, until something strange happened decades later. Because Route 417 still exists, and every once in a while, drivers passing that empty field report something impossible. For a few seconds, they can see the town again. The first new report came almost 15 years after Greyford disappeared. A delivery driver named Carlos was traveling through the mountains just after midnight. It was a quiet route, and he had driven that highway dozens of times before. As he approached the empty field where Greyford used to be, he noticed something strange. Lights. At first, he thought they were headlights from another vehicle, but the lights weren't moving. They were scattered across the hillside exactly where the town used to be. Carlos slowed his truck, and that's when he saw something that made his hands tighten around the steering wheel. Buildings, dozens of them, houses, streetlights, even the old diner that had disappeared years ago. The town was back. Carlos pulled his truck onto the side of the road and stepped out. Everything looked normal. The lights in the houses were glowing softly. Wind moved through the trees. It looked exactly like a quiet town late at night. Except for one detail. There were no people outside, no cars moving, no sound at all. Carlos walked a few steps toward the edge of the road. That's when one of the house lights suddenly turned off. Then another and another. One by one, every light in the town began shutting down. Just like the blackout that happened the night Greyford vanished. Carlos quickly returned to his truck. and the moment he closed the door, the entire town disappeared again. By the time his headlights pointed back toward the field, there was nothing there, just empty land. Carlos reported the experience the next morning. Most people assumed he was lying, until more drivers started reporting the same thing. Every few months, someone would see Grayford again, but only for a few minutes. Always after midnight, always silent, and always disappearing the moment someone got too close. Eventually, researchers noticed something even stranger. The sightings weren't random. They happened on the exact same date every year. The anniversary of the night Grayford disappeared, which led investigators to wonder about something unsettling. What if the town never truly vanished? What if it was still there, just not in the same time anymore? A group of researchers decided to test that theory. They planned an overnight investigation on Route 417 during the next anniversary of Grayford's disappearance. Their idea was simple: wait on the highway until midnight and see if the town appeared again. At first, nothing happened. The road stayed quiet. The field remained empty. But exactly at 2 a.m., the same time the blackout happened decades earlier, something appeared above the mountains. A faint blue glow, the same light Daniel had described years before. The glow slowly spread across the valley, and within seconds, Grayford appeared again. The buildings returned exactly where they had once stood. Streetlights flickered on. The diner's sign lit up. It looked like the town had simply returned to existence. But when the researchers looked closer, they realized something chilling. Inside the houses, people were moving. Silhouettes passing by windows. Figures sitting at tables. Children running through hallways. The town was alive. But none of those people seemed aware that decades had passed. To them, it was still the same night the blackout happened. The researchers debated whether to enter the town, but before they could decide, something else happened. One of the figures inside the diner turned toward the window and stared directly at them. Then another. And another. Soon, dozens of people inside the town were looking in the same direction, directly toward the highway, toward the researchers. The people inside Grayford had finally noticed them, and suddenly the blue light above the town began glowing brighter. The buildings started to blur. The streets flickered. Grayford was fading again. The researchers barely made it back to their vehicles before the town vanished once more. But as they drove away, one of them looked in the rearview mirror and saw something that still hasn't been explained. A single figure standing in the empty field where the town had been. A person who wasn't there before. Someone who had stepped out of Grayford just before it disappeared. Standing alone on Route 417, looking completely lost. If you enjoy mysterious and suspenseful stories like this one, and want to hear more unexplained mysteries from around the world, make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.